are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire. When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. So the will of God was for him to seek God concerning the situation back in Jerusalem, which is what he was doing. He was calling out to God. And how long did he do this? Was it just a 1-hour quick prayer to God and then go see the king? He continued on for 3 months. It was a very protracted amount of time that he was calling on God to do something about the destruction of Jerusalem. Sometimes we will pray for God to do something and God will say, you're the one to do it. I had that experience when I was in high school, maybe junior year. The Sunday school superintendent at my home church died very unexpectedly. And the Board of Christian Ed needed a Sunday school superintendent. And so the pastor asked the church to pray about it. And I was praying about it, and the Board of Education came to me and said, would you be the Sunday school superintendent? What? That wasn't what I was expecting. I thought maybe somebody else. And what's actually interesting is that many years later, my father became Sunday school superintendent. Now, I didn't have it very long. I wasn't on the deacon board very long because I graduated and moved on with my life. But sometimes when we pray for something and believe that God's going to have someone else do it, God will say, you're the one to do it. You do it. And that was the case with Nehemiah. You're the one to oversee the rebuilding of my holy city, to rebuild the wall, and eventually to rebuild the temple. That was quite a ways down the road. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought for him, I took the wine and gave it to the king. I had not been sad in his presence before. So going into the presence of the king, after 3 months of intense prayer and fasting and seeking God, his heart is still broken. And he says very clearly, I had never been sad in the presence of the king before. And that's why it was so noticeable, because of the dramatic change in him. And the chances are very good that during that 3-month period, the king never laid eyes on Nehemiah. He had no idea the distress that Nehemiah was in because they hadn't seen each other until after the 3-month period. Nehemiah comes back into the presence of the king, and the king notices something's different. And he becomes very curious about it. Prior to that meeting, Nehemiah was powerless other than praying. It was the king who had the absolute authority. But once he met with the king then gave him the power to become the governor to oversee this project, which is what he did. Bless you, brother.
Thank you. Yes.
So he traveled back to Jerusalem, and he begins to, with his own eyes, travel around and see the destruction. When the Babylonians came in, they came in full bore, and they did a very good job of destruction. And for all of these years, the city lay in ruin. Years and years, nothing had been done about it. If you've ever gone around an old steel mill that's been closed for years, walk around onto the property, you drive by, you can see. It looks nothing like the steel mill that was there years before. It's the same building, but there's weeds and grass and maybe garbage in there. Just a very distressing situation. So the king asked me, why does your face look so sad when you are not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of heart. I was very much afraid. Isn't it interesting that this pagan king had discernment to know that something was troubling Nehemiah's heart, not his physical pump. Of course, at that time, they had very little knowledge of those kinds of things. But there was something that was really bothering him. And Nehemiah admits here, I was afraid. Asking the king to do anything was a very dangerous thing to do. Remember the book of Esther. When Esther realized the plot of Haman, and she sought God in prayer and fasting under the direction of her uncle Mordecai, when she approached the king, she too was in fear and trembling. The king could have had her head taken off, just like he had his previous wife's head taken off. To approach a king and request anything was a fearful thing. Esther was afraid. Nehemiah is afraid because he has no way of knowing what the response is going to be. He doesn't know if the king's going to say, yeah, okay, that's a great idea. Go ahead and do it. Or he's going to say, that's too bad. Deal with it here. Any number of things. Which kind of reminds us, how should we approach God in prayer? In fear, not a trembling, but a very healthy respect for who God is and the power that he possesses. Because he is the all-powerful being. And again, that is a very healthy respect. I said to the king, may the king live forever. He's trying to butter him up. Make him feel good. If I butter this guy up, maybe he'll find favor with me and we can get things going. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire? The king said to me, what is it you want? Then I prayed to the God of heaven. You see what he had spent 3 months in prayer. And he gets to this point, and the king asks him, what do you want me to do? He does a very quick, under your breath prayer. Have you ever prayed one of those real quick? It reminds me of a funny story that I heard years ago about a farmer and his grandson. They were out in the fields, and the cows and the bulls were all over here pasturing. And all of a sudden, one of the bulls decided to come chasing after him. And the farmer says, come on, son, let's run. And the boy says, aren't we going to stop and pray? He says, I stay prayed up for times like this. You don't want to stand in that field asking God for protection when that bull's coming at you. Am I right, Dick? I stay prayed up for times like this. I went to Jerusalem, and after staying 3 days, and I set out during the night with a few others. I had not told anyone that my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There were no mounts with me except the one I was riding on. So we skip forward, and the king grants his permission to go down there and do an examination, eyeball on, to actually see what is going on. And intelligence sources will tell you the best sources are eyes on the field. They have people that work for you that are there, and they can see with their own eyes what is going on. That's what's been so troubling about North Korea, because we really haven't had many eyes on that place. It's been such a restricted place. That's changing now. And you better believe that when Mike Pompeo came back after 2 visits to North Korea, he was peppered by the CIA and the State Department as to what his observations were in North Korea. So Nehemiah comes down and he begins to do this inspection. And nobody knows what his plan is. And what is his plan? It is God's plan to rebuild the city. Before you rebuild the city, you got to build the wall. Then I said to them, you see the trouble we are in? Jerusalem lies in ruins. Its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me, and what the king had said to me. They replied, let's start rebuilding. So they began this good work. So Nehemiah is the one who is in charge of the rebuilding as the governor. And before anything else can be done, the wall needs to be built. Boy, does that sound familiar for America? Build the wall. Build the wall. It's kind of funny. Last night, Judge Janine, I'm becoming a big fan of hers, on Fox News. She had a liberal Democrat on there. And the first thing she said, at your home, do you have walls and fences around your property? He goes, yeah. Then why are you opposed to putting walls up in this country? Oh, but mine's a private residence, that's different. And then a little later on, he says, let anybody come in. She says, okay. And his name was Chris. Chris, I'm going to tell the audience, let anybody come to your house at once. You're going to feed them, you're going to clothe them, you're going to give them medical care. Anybody that, oh, but I'm a private citizen, I can't do that. She made him look terrible. Turned him into mincemeat. He didn't know what to say. He tried. Build the wall. If for no other reason, and she shared this last night, 90% of the heroin that comes into this country comes over the Mexico-U.S. border. You want to cut down the Mexico cartel's drug trade in this country? Build an impenetrable wall. And they're talking about a wall that's 30 feet high. Very hard to scale that. If you have a 10, 15-foot wall, you can get a ladder and go over it. You get a 30-foot wall, that's going to be a little more challenging. And that would immediately stop the drug trade. Nehemiah understood the importance of the wall. If you think that walls do not work, criminals entering into San Diego dropped by over 90% when the wall went up outside of San Diego. In Israel, when they put their walls up to keep the Palestinians out, the Palestinians entering in went down by 95%, except coming through the preordained certain gates, certain entrances. They couldn't just come in whenever they wanted. Walls work. They do. So we leave Nehemiah after arriving in Jerusalem and beginning the project of rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. Next week, we're going to be looking at Ezra and Nehemiah leading through a crisis. The idea of building a wall and starting that is one thing, but seeing it through to completion, that's a whole different ballgame. And I thank you and ask God's blessings upon you. And God bless our worship service.